Hey guys, so this time I thought I would do a really quick thing on tapeworms, the most common of which in horses is Anapocephala perfoliata, but there are a few different species that will affect horses. I believe this is the only one that you're actually responsible for knowing. So first, let's get into their life cycle. This starts like the others. They're shed off in the feces. It's fairly typical for them to actually be shed off as segments instead of just eggs, because the adult tapeworm is a segmented worm. It's not like the nematodes where it's kind of smooth across the body. It's actually a segmented worm that has kind of little creases every so often, and sometimes they will shed those segments. So after the segments are shed and their eggs, mites will actually come along and eat the segments. And at that point, they're going to develop into larvae within the mite. Eventually, the mite is going to be consumed by the horse, at which point the adult tapeworm will actually develop within the horse's intestines after the larvae are released from the mites. These adult tapeworms are then obviously going to continue on and restart the whole entire life cycle again by shedding the eggs. So you can tell the life cycles of these parasites are fairly similar to one another. Generally, they're shedding the eggs, they develop some amount on the pasture, and then they're consumed by the horse. They travel to where they prefer and they start laying eggs again. This one, it's important to remember that they're consumed by a mite. So how can we diagnose tapeworms? Generally, you'll do a fecal egg count, but it's important to remember that the fecal egg counts aren't that terribly sensitive to them. There's actually less than 10% accuracy. So it's more of a positive or negative test and less of a quantitative test like you might for strongyles. So their egg looks like this. It's kind of shaped like a D. You can almost think of this as like the end of the tab of tape that you're ripping off. I don't know if that helps you or not. But typically you will do perhaps a series of fecal egg counts to see if these guys will show up if you really suspect them. And tapeworms are important for one primary reason, and their primary kind of consequence or cause of clinical disease is that they'll cause an impaction colic. So impaction colic is essentially where the intestines are blocked and the food is piling up and the horse obviously isn't able to vomit or anything. And so that's going to cause some pretty severe consequences. Tapeworms prefer to live at the junction of the ileum and the cecum, so where the final section of small intestine meets the big pouch of hindgut fermentation that is the cecum. And this is a fairly small, skinny area, so if a bunch of tapeworms are blocking it up, it's going to cause impaction colic fairly easily. So it's important to know how we want to treat horses for this. First of all, which dewormers are effective. Generally, benzimidazoles, macrocyclolactones, they're not going to work against tapeworms since they are so different from the other nematodes that we know of, the small strongyles, large strongyles, Parascaricicorm, all of those. So we can treat them with parental type dewormers, so parental pinnate or praziquantel. I think praziquantel is the more common one as it's combined with moxidectin, so you can kind of deworm for strongyles and for tapeworms at the same time. I wouldn't be surprised if you got a question about which dewormers are effective for tapeworms. When do we want to treat them? We want to treat them during the late fall or the early winter. And this is important because that's the time at which their life cycle kind of pauses as they overwinter, because they're not going to survive on the pastures. So that's kind of the most efficient time to deworm the horses for them. And it's generally the recommendation is that you deworm them once a year, maybe twice if you really think that tapeworms are a problem. And generally that is during the late fall or early winter when their transmission cycle is kind of pausing. So yeah, tapeworms, I would just remember that this is the shape of their egg. They're a segmented worm, they're a flat worm, and that they'll cause an ileocecal junction. And that's probably about all that you need to know for them, as well as their scientific name, Anapocephala perfoliata. So yeah, that was a quick one. Thanks for watching.